Buckle up, and here we go, hockey fans. The NHL postseason is upon us, and Steele and I are breaking down every single series, round by round, on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, starting on Thursday's episode with the spicy Atlantic Division. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The NHL is buzzing, and you're tapped right back into your daily source. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down and making us your first listen every single day. Thursday's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, shocker, and it's a big fan of the Monopoly Go app, the mobile hit on a classic, Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. Steele, we are not playing around on today's episode or the next four. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we have you covered. We're doing every single division, series by series. X factors, best bets, who wins and in how many games. And on today's episode, it is no exception. And we're starting with the Atlantic Division. Tomorrow, you can get us at the Metro, and so on and so forth into the weekend as the playoffs arrive on Saturday night. Steele, if you're not fired up at this point of the season, and you know I am all throughout the year, you really do need to check your pulse, because Florida, Tampa, Toronto, Boston, we're popping off out east in the Atlantic. There is no shortage of good matchups. You and I haven't talked about our predictions off air. I'm excited to hear who you're looking at in terms of players, X factors, and of course, who you think's coming out on top in round one. We're going to do this all playoffs long. Round two, round three, conference finals, Stanley Cup finals. We'll be breaking it all down. Over to you, my friend, because I know we're going to need every minute that we got. Tampa, Florida, the battle in the South. Where are you looking? What are you thinking? And I'm excited to hear who you think takes this bad boy at the end.
Look, this is probably the matchup I wanted to see more than any other matchup, was the battle of the Florida teams. Florida Panthers, Tampa Bay Lightning. This is how you start the NHL playoffs in round one, is with the two Florida teams going head-to-head. And just looking at the season series, it was in Florida's favor. They were 2-1-0 this season, outscored them 15-9. There was a game where the Florida Panthers scored 9 goals. They won 9-2 in that matchup. So a little bit of an outlier, but nonetheless, they take the season series. And I'll just jump right into my X factor for the Tampa Bay Lightning heading into this first round. And I'm going with Andrei Vasilevskiy as the X factor for me. Vasilevskiy is coming off the worst season of his career with a 900 save percentage and a 2.90 goals against average. We know he was coming off the injury. I mean, even with that, it's not even that terrible. It's not to his standards, but it's not the worst we've seen. So just that speaks of how valuable Vasilevskiy is, and he has been throughout his entire career. And even though Tampa Bay has a plus 21 goal differential, they finished 11th in goals against with 264. One of the worst top teams, playoff teams for that matter, to have one of the worst goals against this season. The Panthers lead the NHL with the most shots on net this season, with over 27 shots on net. So we know Vasilevskiy is going to see a lot of puck. He's going to see a lot of rubber in the first round against the Florida Panthers, and he needs to bring his A game. We know that he has been the rock, the foundation over the last couple of seasons, being that guy, the number one guy for the Tampa Bay Lightning, alongside Kucherov, Stamkos, and Braden Point, Victor Hedman, obviously. But Vasilevskiy was the number one best goaltender for the longest time. That reign has been overtaken by, it's up for debate, but there's a few guys that have taken that number one spot. Debate, but Vasilevskiy, to me, needs to be the X factor. We don't need Nikita Kucherov is having an incredible season. Steven Stamkos is great in the playoffs. So is Braden Point. Step up and be at his best in round one. He's my X factor.
I absolutely love this deal, and I'm already giddy with anticipation. The Florida Panthers roll into this series, obviously, on the backs of a very impressive run last season. But I can't help but feel that the makeup of this one feels and looks a lot different. And then when you take a look immediately and you know where I'm headed before I even spit out my X factor, The Tampa Bay Lightning have the best power play unit in the game. Florida only has the 8th. Tampa has the 5th best penalty kill in the NHL, slightly better than the Tampa Bay Lightning as well. Shout out to the Wi-Fi, my friends. If it's a little sketch, don't worry. We're going to get through it. But let me just throw out my X factor then, Steele, because look, I'm not even going to chirp you for saying it's a goaltender because I think that's an easy one, but here it's a very fair and accurate one. It's Steven Stamkos for the Tampa Bay Lightning for me. That's the X factor. And when I dug into his playoff numbers, like he has another 40 goal season this year under his belt in the regular season, in the postseason, Steele, in 123 games. That's number one. He's a winner. He has 95 points, Steele. 5-game winners, 17 power play goals. It comes down to that power play. It comes down to Steven Stamkos. And let me just throw out my X factor for the Florida Panthers for you and hit me with your take on this. Again, not a bold one. Matthew Tkachuk. It's got to run through Matthew Tkachuk. We saw the swagger that his performances really embodied the whole team's confidence. And I think you're going to need to, if you're going to go through this Tampa Bay team, number one, this isn't the Boston Bruins overconfident last year who also backed into the postseason. This is a Tampa Bay Lightning team very much feeling themselves, and we haven't even got to Nikita Kucherov yet. So hit me with your takes on that because I really do think Matthew Tkachuk is going to be a very, very key piece to this series. I know that sounds obvious, but he has also, at times this season, Steele, really underachieved.
Steven Stamkos was gonna be, or he is my second X factor heading into this round one. We know Nikita Kucherov is gonna do what he does best. He's been doing it all season long, and he does it relentlessly in the playoffs. So we don't have to really worry about Nikita Kucherov. I was a little worried about Andrei Vasilevskiy after the poor season to his standards. That's why he needs to be my X factor. Again, I agree with you with Matthew Tkachuk. Everything pretty much runs through him offensively, physically. Whenever there's chaos, he's in the middle of it. It runs through him. So I can't disagree with you there. For me, the X factor from the Florida Panthers, a little bit maybe on the outside, you could say, but I'm going with Sam Bennett of the Florida Panthers as my X factor. 41 points in 69 games, 100 penalty minutes, 171 shots, 43 blocks, 174 hits. He's second on the team in penalty minutes, and he's second on the team in hits. They have a lot of tough guys, Matthew Tkachuk being one of them on their squad. But to me, Sam Bennett might be the toughest guy of them all on the Florida Panthers squad. He plays a very clean but physical game. He's not afraid to drop the gloves and throw a few haymakers with somebody out there. At times, though, he needs to be aware of how ferocious he can get. Because Paul Maurice might have to rein him in a few times if he gets a little bit out of control with the penalties. Again, takes a lot of penalties. And the Florida Panthers were the most penalized team this season. They can't afford to be down a man against the best power play unit in the Tampa Bay Lightning. So that's number one. He could be an X factor on the positive side, but he can also be an X factor on the negative side. That's why he needs to really control himself. But just looking at what he did last year in the postseason as well. In 20 games last playoffs, Bennett had 15 points, 60 penalty minutes, 73 shots, and 84 hits, and played almost 21 minutes of average ice time, which is 4 to 5 minutes than he's averaged over the last 3 regular seasons. He plays a lot more in the postseason, and he brings it on a nightly basis. And we saw that in the last game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, where he was running around, he was in the mix of everything, he was laying the body out there. So for me, Sam Bennett is going to be an X factor, along with to your point, Matthew Tkachuk.
I really like that Sam Bennett pick, Steele. And everything that you're actually describing there, you and I obviously don't touch on a lot of playoff pool angles, but I think you just touched on all the ones that you need to hear there. Sam Bennett sounds like a very sneaky ad. And we're going to get to, let's get to it right now, let's do it right after the break in terms of who wins and how many games, because also maybe there's a really good chance for Sam Bennett to be playing more than one round of playoff hockey. That's always important when you're looking at postseason playoff pools. It's also important when we're taking a look at the Toronto Maple Leafs and Boston Bruins right around the break. Holy Steele, take a deep breath and exhale. Here we go. And Steele and I are going to serve up some of our favorite best bets from the Atlantic Division playoff series to round out the episode. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. Yeah, we have a competitive side on this show, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times Great twist on the classic Monopoly, and you don't play it. You play it hundreds on different Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part, you get to mess with your friends. You can charge them rent on iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. All the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is, and it's not just the competitive side in us that likes it. You can team up with your friends and people around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. Get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or in Google Play.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Are you still watching on Fox Sports or ESPN? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day, bringing you the top and the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, leave the follow button, and leave a like, and continue to leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us. We're going to get to the second Atlantic playoff series between the Toronto Maple Leafs, Boston Bruins. But first, let's get to our predictions, Flip.
Yep.
Over to you. Who do you have winning this series between the Lightning and Panthers?
Amalie Arena for the Tampa Bay Lightning over the past, 7 or 8 seasons.
Fortress.
Just been a fortress. And this season, 24-11-5. Maybe doesn't exactly jump off the page, but the Florida Panthers down the stretch have not looked like the Florida Panthers that flexed their muscle all season long, went on crazy road trip wins. I'm just not going to read into overall their season stats, and I will read into the experience and the winning caliber of the Tampa Bay Lightning. So let me spit it out for you. Tampa Bay Lightning in 7 games. This one's going to be a bloodbath. I think it starts as such, Steele, and I've thought about this one quite frequently. I think Tampa comes out and actually blows the doors off them. And then you see Paul Maurice tighten the reins and show what this Florida team can do. I'm not going to come in here and say that they're going to get beaten in 4 or 5 games or something crazy. They're going to get their wins against this Tampa team who have also had their ups and downs this season. So I'll leave it at this. The special teams on the power play has been clearly much better for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I think that's where they're going to get it done, along with your X Factor and Andrei Vasilevskiy. There is no disrespect being shown to the Florida Panthers. That's not what this is about. Yeah. I just think given all of the disrespect that actually has been shown to the Tampa Bay Lightning over the last 2 years, and Steven Stamkos being pissed off, and otherwise Victor Hedman having a great year, Braden Point, no one's talking about 45 goals. Tampa Bay in 7, Steele. This one's going to be a bloodbath, very similarly to the series we talk about in a second.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I tossed and turned on this prediction in my decision for a little bit, but I ended up coming to the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games. Kucherov is just too dangerous. 142-point season this year. He has 160 points in 142 playoff games. And just looking at the history between these two teams in the playoffs, just go back to 2021. Tampa Bay beat them 4-2 in the second round. And then in 2022, they beat them 4-2 in the first round in 2021. And then they swept them 4-0 in the second round of 2022. So the Tampa Bay Lightning against the Florida Panthers, they've had their number in the postseason. I'm with you. Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 for me. Tampa Bay Lightning in 7 for Flip. That's the first playoff series that we've gone through. Let's get over to the next one in the Atlantic Division. The Toronto Maple Leafs and the Boston Bruins. This is going to be a hot and heavy topic for us, and might go the entire episode or the rest of the episode. But just to set the scene before we get into the X factors and our predictions, the Boston Bruins versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Bruins were 4-0-0, outscored them 15-7 this season. And just looking at that alone, it's very daunting when you look at that, and then you start to think a little bit about the history between these two teams in the playoffs. Before I throw it over to you, honestly, this is actually the best I've felt with this matchup going into this postseason. So, going into round 1 with the Maple Leafs and the Boston Bruins is the best I felt with all that history, even the regular season series in the Bruins' favor. Over to you, my friend, the X factors and predictions.
Deep breath, Steele. I don't know if you remember at this time last season, Steele, I had to go on an international honeymoon to the heart of the Italian peninsula to get away from the madness of the first round last year, and it worked. The Leafs pulled it out against Tampa Bay. I don't got an extra 10K sitting in the tank, so I'm going to be in South Niagara watching this one very much live and in person. The Toronto Maple Leafs last time beating the Boston Bruins in a playoff series was the 1959 Stanley Cup, Steele. And no, this isn't going to be a negative spiel. I'm keeping it positive. This is the 17th postseason meeting between the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. It comes down to this for me before I spit out my X factor. We know it. People are talking about it. This is repeating and obvious. The Boston Bruins defense and goaltending going up against the Toronto Maple Leafs elite offensive attack. The Boston Bruins straight up and down do not have the secondary scoring or the offensive depth of the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're not as good on the power play. Those two things are going to have to be how the Toronto Maple Leafs win this series. The Boston Bruins have the best defenseman in this series in Charlie McAvoy, one of the best in the game, and they clearly have the better two goaltenders. So the X factors for me, for the Toronto Maple Leafs, very clearly, it doesn't even matter if it's Samsonov. It has to be Wall or Samsonov. One of those goaltenders has to show up, Steele. I don't know about your take on who you think it's going to be. Obviously, it's Samsonov probably going to get the shot to do it first, but you know for a fact that if he gets pumped or if he gets pulled, that Joseph Woll would be run out there very quickly just to see who can take the reins. So that's maybe a cop-out answer, but I'm going to go with the Toronto Maple Leafs goaltending has to be the X factor.
I'm not too sold on that. I do agree with you that the goaltending have to be an X factor, but if Samsonov gets pulled, I think he gets back in the next game. I don't know if they go straight over to Joseph Woll. Wall hasn't looked his best since coming back from injury, and Sammy has looked great.
He looks sensational and gets the win.
Yeah, it might make you think a little bit more, or make me think a little bit more. But I would still go back to Sammy. It just depends on how big of a turnaround it comes if Joseph Woll gets the win in the relieving of Samsonov. So I agree with you. The X factor for sure has to be the goaltending. I'm going with Max Domi as my X factor in this series. Sneaky once again, 47 points in 80 games while playing less than 14 minutes of average ice time. I believe he's going to be, or I don't believe, I don't know for a fact, but I think he should be getting more than 14 minutes in the postseason with the way he's been playing with Austin Matthews and Tyler Bertuzzi on that top line. The chemistry is even better than what I've seen with Mitch Marner this season. So I really like Max Domi on that top line. He's played really well over the last 2 months. He has 17 points in his last 20 games. And for someone who has 118 penalty minutes and 6 fights this year, you'd think he plays a more physical game, but he really doesn't. He only has 53 hits this year. With that being said, I think he'll be a huge difference maker in this first round. And sort of along the same point that I was making with Sam Bennett, it can be a positive or a negative X factor in this series. Can't be taking dumb penalties. Obviously, stand up for your teammates when necessary, but you can't be running around trying to fight guys every single time someone touches Austin Matthews, just like he did last week against the New Jersey Devils against Nemec, where he literally dropped the gloves because he saw Austin Matthews out of the peripheral vision get touched a little bit. You can't do that. You can't do this you can't do that in the postseason. You can't do that against the Boston Bruins because they'll eat you up alive. So for me, I got to go with Max Domi. He can be an X factor very positively, but he can't be going around making dumb penalties.
I totally agree with you, Steele. And actually, it's just got to be a common thread for this Toronto Maple Leafs.
It has to be.
Overall, because whoever that they entered into this first round against, Florida, Boston, or for some reason it was someone else, if the season shook out differently, they were probably going to be the underdog. So also when your defensive game is what it is, there is zero room for dumb penalties, selfish play, or boneheaded moves. That's just kind of an obvious fact. But when you play the game that the Toronto Maple Leafs do, run and gun, hang your hat on the offensive end, you can't be down a man. This isn't rocket science. And the Boston Bruins still have the 11th best power play in the NHL. Yes. Is that the second best of the Toronto Maple Leafs? No. But you ain't giving David Pastrnak, McAvoy, and Brad Marchand any type of extra ability to get it done. Let's talk about our other X factors very quickly and round out our predictions for that series. And I'll finish. I got 2 series best bets we can throw out before the end of the episode. Make sure you're turning in for Friday's episode, breaking down the Metro. Saturday, we're headed out west. Along with Sunday, you're tapped into your source.
Tapped into your source after the break. We'll break down our X factors and predictions for the Boston Bruins and Toronto Maple Leafs series. But first, this episode is also brought to you by Policy Genius. Life insurance is an important safety net for your family, but trying to find the right policy on your own can be time-consuming and very overwhelming. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with financial safety net starting today. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. Easily compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Policy Genius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Thank you so much for making us the first listen of your day. Make sure you continue hitting the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Continuing the conversation of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Boston Bruins first round matchup in the playoffs. Over to you, Flip. X factor for the Boston Bruins.
So I kind of copped out with the Toronto Maple Leafs X factor, and I'm going to do the same with the Boston Bruins because for me, it's a clear one. The third line of JVR, Geeky, and Trent Frederick, and somebody out of the bottom six or the bottom pairings of the defensemen are going to have to step up. They're going to need some secondary scoring because no disrespect to the Charlie Coyles, Jake DeBrusques, Pavel Zakas, and Danton Heinens of the world. Those are all peripheral, secondary role player type pieces, and they have far too many of them. So somebody is going to have to do something special because, again, at length, we've talked about the depth of the Toronto Maple Leafs offensive attack. And say what you will about Toronto. Say what you will about the Leafs, Austin Matthews, and all of it. They can score. They have one of the best power plays in the game, and they have the best goal scorer in the game. We're not even talking about Willie Stiles, JT, or Mitch. Those players, other than Pasta, they don't have that Steele, not even close. So to me, if the Toronto Maple Leafs somehow come out and find a way to just get it done early and often offensively, there has to be a response from the Boston Bruins that's not named Brad Marchand, McAvoy, and David Pastrnak. So for me, the X factor, it doesn't really matter who. It's got to be a bottom sixer on the Boston Bruins, somebody stepping up to support those stars.
I thought my answer was a cop-out, but I'm looking pretty good with my X factor here then. I'm going with David Pastrnak as my X factor. You know, the guy who's done it all for the Boston Bruins. He's led the Boston Bruins this season with 110 points. That's 44 more points than Brad Marchand, who was second in points for the Boston Bruins. So that shows you how important David Pastrnak is to this franchise right now. In the 4 wins Boston had this year against Toronto, Pastrnak had 7 points, 24 shots, and was a +5. Toronto does not have an answer, or should I say did not have an answer for Pastrnak during the regular season. He did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. The Leafs have not been able to find an answer to stopping this player. I'm really hoping they do something and they have an answer going into the postseason.
Yeah,
if the Maple Leafs can stop David Pastrnak, they win this series hands down. Because they, like you said, they don't have the center depth. They don't have the bottom 6 scoring. Yeah, they do have the goaltending, but we've seen at times the goaltending can be a little bit shaky too. So for me, David Pastrnak needs to continue being the X factor like he's been all season long.
Okay.
With that being said,
what is it?
My prediction for this series, I'm going Maple Leafs in 6.
Whoa. I'm here for it. It's not crazy. I'm just like, I don't even know what to say about anything right now because I need the puck to drop so badly. It's not even funny. I'm just going to keep repeating it. Let me spit it out. Leafs in 7. All right. Leafs in 7. There's going to be a slaying of the dragon, Steele. You heard me say it before. You've got me on this positivity train. When it comes down to the key points of the game, like you and I are, you've mentioned it before, we're realists. We're going to come on here and give the Boston Bruins the flowers and the credit they deserve as the better team, as clearly the better goaltending tandem and the better blue line. The postseason is a different beast. And if Matthews can translate even, let's say, 80 to 85% of the magic that he's had going on this year, it's going to be very hard for the Boston Bruins to match it in terms of just punch for punch. Are they going to be able to replicate that against the big bad Bruins? I don't know. But if they do, this is going to be a very, very fun series. And I could see it definitely going 7 games. Leafs in 7, Steele. I'm here for the positivity. I hope you feel good about this. And if you're okay, I'm going to hit you with my best bet for this series. And it goes right in the same vein. At minus 250, so not a big odd, but slap this into a parlay and thank me later. Austin Matthews, 3 or more goals in the series. If Toronto's going to have to get through this Boston team, Boston, I'm going to spit it out. Poppy's going to score at least 3 or 4, if not more. So give me Austin Matthews plus 3.5 goals in this series, minus 250 as my favorite bet for that series. Leafs in 7, baby.
I'm going to look to you for the odds here coming from this series, but I'm just going with a straight-out series win with the Toronto Maple Leafs winning in 6. So I don't know what the odds are for this specific
I got you right here.
For that,
I got you right here. I'm going to pull it up for you.
I've got the Toronto Maple Leafs in 6 for the series win. Even as an underdog just to win this series, they probably have some plus money. And then it's going the same way for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa Bay Lightning in 6, and then another solo bet on the Tampa Bay Lightning to win this series overall. Both with, obviously winning in 6, having that specific number, the odds will be pretty high up there. And then just winning in general. I believe you said the Tampa Bay Lightning were plus 140 to win the series.
I believe so. And also just the Toronto Maple Leafs to win in 6 gets you a nice payout of plus 440, Steele. So
I'll take that.
I think that's a very nice best bet for the series. And I'll round it out with my best bet for the Tampa series. I mentioned Bolts in 7. I think did you have Bolts in 6? I forget.
I had Bolts in 6, yeah.
So you and I are very close with the first 2. You and I are usually pretty close with how this ends up wrapping up. So for fun, Tampa Bay in 7 for me, plus 610. Tampa Bay in 6, plus 570. These are all very juicy angles, which Steele and I will continue to break down every single one of them tomorrow, Friday's episode. We're hitting the Metro. Saturday, we're headed out west. We're going to do the same thing. X factors, best bets, who wins and in how many games, and anything else you need to know to make sure you're still stacking a little bit of paper here at the end of the season, Steele.
Rangers versus Capitals, Hurricanes versus Islanders, breaking it all down over the weekend. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Once again, make sure you go check out Locked On Sports today. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. They are here for you 24/7 with the top sports stories covered by local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. You can find it on your favorite podcast platform, on YouTube, and the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow for the all-time playoff breakdown starting Saturday, April 20th.
Peace.